Hey friend, it's raining softly tonight, can you hear it? That steady, hushed rhythm tapping against the glass, like the earth itself is whispering slow and sleepy. Let's stay here for a while, where it's warm, where stories drift like the scent of wet leaves and the comfort of memory.
Tonight, let me tell you a tale, one older than empires.
Older than pyramids, older even than the stars we now name after the gods. This is the story of a fire. But not just any fire, the first flame, the one stolen from heaven and gifted to us.
If this story has gently stirred something within you, stay close.
There are more ancient whispers waiting, more flames, more forgotten truths. Subscribe, rest easy, and let the myths keep you warm tonight. Let's start with the world before fire. Long ago, the world was dim. Not dark in the way you know it, but empty. Cold, humans lived like shadows. They shivered in caves, they spoke without words. They knew hunger but not how to cook. They feared beasts but had no torches to hold them back. They could only watch the stars and wonder what warmth felt like.
And the gods, they watched too.
From Olympus, the mountain where thunder slept and lightning played, the gods feasted and drank.
Immortal, untouchable.
They had fire, warm, golden, alive, and they kept it for themselves. For them, fire was sacred, divine, dangerous. They believed mortals were not ready, that to give them fire would be to give them rebellion, invention, choice. But one god disagreed. His name was Prometheus. Well, Prometheus was a titan, not quite god, not quite man. He walked between the worlds. And while others of his kind held grudges after the great war of the gods, Prometheus watched humanity with curiosity. He saw them stumble in the dark, saw them tremble in storms, in silence, in fear. And somewhere deep in his immortal chest, something flickered. Compassion, they were so fragile.
So unfinished and yet so full of potential.
Prometheus did not see humans as pets or playthings. He saw them as children. And children, he thought, deserve a chance to grow. So, one night, as Olympus slept and the hearth fire burned quietly in the hall of the gods, Prometheus crept in.
No thunder roared, no lightning flashed.
Just soft footsteps and the quiet crackle of divine flame. He reached into the fire, cupped a small piece of it in a fennel stalk, thin, hollow, perfect for hiding warmth.
And then he left, carrying light in the dark.
Carrying hope and defiance and a future humanity could not yet imagine. When Prometheus gave fire to humans, they didn't know what it was at first. It flickered, it danced, it hissed and cracked, but it warmed them. It cooked their meat, it lit their caves, it kept the wolves away.
It was beautiful and it changed everything.
With fire they made tools, they forged metal. They told stories in the night, shadows dancing on stone walls. And in every flame Prometheus lived on. But gifts, especially forbidden ones, always come with a price. The fire had been lit, and though the rain still falls gently outside your window, in the heavens above a storm was brewing. For while humanity rejoiced, warming their hands, their hearts, their hopes around this strange new flame, Zeus watched from the clouds, and his eyes were full of thunder. Zeus, king of the gods, had not granted permission. He was the ruler of Olympus, master of law, wielder of the sky's fury. To him, mortals were like ants, brief, breakable, beneath the attention of immortals. But fire changed everything. With fire came power, with power came choice, and with choice came danger. Zeus saw Prometheus's gift not as compassion, but as rebellion. A challenge, a whisper, that mortals might one day rise and stand beside the gods, no longer trembling in the dark, but daring to dream.
And Zeus would not tolerate disobedience.
Especially not from a titan. Prometheus knew what was coming. How could he not? He'd lived among gods long enough to understand wrath. But he did not hide, he did not run. Instead, he stood at the edge of the world, high in the frozen silence of the Caucasus Mountains, a place so remote that no prayer had ever reached it. There, surrounded by wind and stone and sky, Prometheus waited.
And then the chains came.
Forged by Hephaestus, god of the forge, under Zeus's cruel command, chains of unbreakable adamant, cold as Olympus itself. The gods dragged Prometheus to a jagged cliffside. They wrapped the chains around his arms, his chest, his legs. They pinned him to the stone, high above the valleys where no fire could reach. And Zeus pronounced his sentence: for stealing fire and gifting it to mortals, you shall suffer.
Every day forever.
Each morning, as the first light crept across the peaks, a great eagle, vast as a ship, born of Zeus's fury, would descend from the clouds. And with talons sharp as bronze, it would tear into Prometheus's side. It would feast upon his liver, the seat of pain and passion in ancient thought.
And every night, it would grow back, only for the horror to repeat, again and again. And again there was no end.
No escape. Just the howling wind, the cold stone, and the eternal punishment of a god who dared to love humankind too much. 1,000 years passed, or maybe more. In myth, time is not measured in clocks, but in suffering. Prometheus, bound and bleeding, became part of the mountain. Ravens nested in his shadow. Snow fell upon his brow. He watched the rise and fall of empires from his prison in the clouds. But he never cried out, not once, because even in pain, he had no regret. The fire had been given. Humanity had begun to grow, and in the flicker of every campfire, in the warmth of every home, his silent defiance burned on. Can you still hear the rain? Soft, steady, like footsteps wandering through time. High above the earth, Prometheus remained bound, silent, bleeding, waiting. But even gods cannot wait forever, and neither can fate. Far below the storm-scarred cliffs, a young man was walking through the world. His name was Hercules. You might know him by another name, Hercules, the strongest of mortals, the son of Zeus, born of a mortal woman. A man of legend, yes, but also of pain, of guilt.
Of tasks so terrible they bent even his back.
Hercules had suffered, he had bled. He had endured the wrath of gods, the betrayal of kings, the weight of 12 impossible labors. And now he had reached his final trial. They say he climbed in silence, each step slow, heavy.
As if he could feel the pain waiting at the summit. As if he already knew that this story wasn't truly his.
But still, he climbed through snow, through mist, through wind that bit like teeth, until at last he saw him, the chained god, the forgotten flame-bringer. Prometheus, still bound, still breathing, his eyes half closed beneath a century of suffering. And Hercules understood this was not a battle, this was a reckoning. Just then, like clockwork, like curse, the eagle came again. Its wings darkened the sky. Its cry echoed across the cliffs. It dove with fury. But this time, something was different.
Hercules didn't run, he didn't flinch.
He drew his bow, not a weapon of war, but of precision. And with a calm deeper than the storm, he let the arrow fly. The eagle screamed, its wings twisted, and it fell, down, down into the endless valleys below. For the first time in centuries, silence. No tearing, no torture.
Just wind and Hercules. Hercules stepped forward.
He placed his hands upon the ancient chains. They were cold, alive,
humming with the rage of Olympus.
But they broke because he willed it so. With each shatter of metal, the mountain sighed. Prometheus collapsed into Hercules' arms, not dead, but no longer only suffering. His eyes opened, and for the first time in 1,000 years he whispered, "Thank you, child of thunder, bringer of peace." But gifts, even kindness, demand payment. Zeus, watching from Olympus, knew what had been done, and though his anger still burned, a quiet understanding settled over him. Prometheus was no longer the enemy. He had served his time. His pain had become myth, and even gods, perhaps, can learn to forgive. In the end, Prometheus was free. But Hercules would carry the weight of the moment forever. Not as punishment, but as legacy.
Because sometimes being a hero doesn't mean fighting monsters. It means unbinding someone who no longer has the strength to fight.
And walking away, knowing you changed the story. Now let's begin our next myth, one full of beauty, sorrow, betrayal, and silence. A story often twisted by history, but beneath it all, something achingly human. Let the rain keep falling, friend. Let your thoughts grow still. Because now we descend into a temple where a girl once prayed and fate stood waiting. The rain still falls, and somewhere in the dark, a whisper lingers. Her name was Medusa. You've heard of her, haven't you? The woman with snakes for hair, the monster who turned men to stone.
A face so cursed, even a glance could end a life.
But the truth, like rain soaking into earth, runs deeper.
This is not a story of monsters.
This is a story of transformation, of pain, of punishment, and the price of being beautiful in a world ruled by gods. Medusa wasn't always feared.
Once she was mortal, only mortal.
Unlike her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, eternal, terrifying divine, Medusa was fragile. Soft skin, wide eyes.
And hair like rivers of night.
She lived not in caves or shadows, but in the bright halls of Athena's temple.
Yes, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war.
The virgin goddess, the guardian of reason. Medusa served her as a priestess, devoted and pure. She swept the temple floors, lit sacred fires, spoke no word of vanity, wore no gold, touched no man. And yet, her beauty shone like a quiet flame. Even when hidden behind modest robes, it pulled gazes like the moon pulls tide. And one day, a god looked too long.
They say it happened in silence.
A ripple in the temple's stillness, a salt-sweet breeze that didn't belong. And then, the scent of sea. Poseidon, lord of oceans, rider of waves, brother of Zeus. He was not cruel, not in the stories they told. But he was a god, and gods did not ask. He saw Medusa, alone in the temple, praying or cleaning or perhaps just breathing, and something ancient awoke in him. Desire, possession, he did not love her, not truly, but he wanted to touch what he could not own. So he took her. There, beneath the gaze of marble Athena, in a place meant for peace. The temple was defiled, not by Medusa, but by the one who entered without invitation. And yet, when Athena returned, it was Medusa who bore the punishment.
Not the sea god, not the king of storms.
Athena, cold and eternal, looked upon her once devoted priestess, and saw not a victim, but a violation. Not innocence, but imperfection. So she spoke words of divine judgment, laced with ice and rage. And the beauty that had drawn gods from the sea was unmade. Medusa's soft hair withered, twisted, hissed. It grew long and wild and alive. Her eyes, once gentle, burned with divine fury. So powerful that to look into them was to see your own doom reflected. Her skin hardened like stone. Her voice vanished. Her name became a warning. She fled, not into cities or temples, but into exile. A cave far from men,
far from gods, far from mirrors,
where only the wind would visit, and even it moved carefully. Let the rain keep falling, gentle and steady. The fire of Prometheus has gone quiet, and now we walk deeper into the shadows, where a woman waits alone.
Not a monster, not yet.
Just a soul with no home, and a silence thick as stone, far away from Olympus. Far away from prayers. Medusa lived in exile.
Not death, not life.
Something in between. Her home was carved by wind and time. A cave on the edge of the world. No path led to it. No map marked its place. Just cliffs mist, and the sound of waves crashing far below. She didn't speak, she didn't cry. She didn't move much anymore. Her body remained, but her soul It wandered in memories, of temples, of silence broken.
Of eyes that did not ask.
Her sisters, monstrous and eternal, came and went. But Medusa stayed because even monsters get tired. And even monsters sometimes just want to be left alone. Her eyes, those terrible eyes, had become her prison.
Anyone who saw them turned to stone. Men came to kill her.
They always did, heroes. Warriors, hunters. They brought swords and shields, torches and tricks. None of them left. Statues littered the edges of her cave, half sunken in moss and time, frozen in fear or awe or arrogance, each one a story she never asked to be part of. Medusa didn't fight, she didn't even move. They looked, they turned, and the quiet returned. But inside she never stopped breaking. Far across the sea, in a kingdom of men and riddles, a young prince was growing restless. Perseus brave.
Bold knave.
He didn't yet know what it meant to lose or to question the wisdom of gods. A king gave him a task. Bring me the head of Medusa. Not for justice, not for safety, but for glory, for control. Perseus, with his proud heart and shining armor, accepted without fear. But even he knew he could not face her with strength alone, so he sought help. The gods, amused and curious, decided to watch this boy dance with death. Hermes, the swift-footed, gave him winged sandals. To fly, to flee, to move like wind.
Hades, lord of shadows, lent him a helmet that made him invisible.
And Athena, cold and calculating, gave him a shield.
Not just any shield, a mirror.
Polished so finely it could reflect stars, or eyes too deadly to meet.
Armed not with brute force, but with cleverness, Perseus took to the skies.
Toward a cave, toward a woman, toward a story older than his name. He found her, as the others had, sleeping perhaps, or simply resting. No sword raised, no trap sprung. She wasn't waiting to fight, she was just there. Stones surrounded her like memories, frozen in time. The wind moved through her hair, which hissed softly. Not angry, just tired. Perseus looked, but only through the shield. He stepped quietly, breath held.
Heart loud, and then swift, silent, he struck. A single blow.
Clean, precise.
And final, her head did not scream.
It did not cry. Even severed, her eyes held their power. And from her blood, pooled and ancient, two creatures were born. Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior of golden blade. From death came new life, from silence came myth. And Perseus flew home triumphant, while the world remembered only the monster. Not the girl, not the priestess, not the quiet beneath the curse. Just Medusa, forever frozen in fearsome beauty. Now let us turn the page to another legend. This time, we follow the footsteps of a young man entering the heart of fear. A maze built not to test courage, but to trap it forever. A story of monsters, kings, secrets, and quiet choices made in the dark. Let the rain fall gently. Let your eyes grow soft. And come walk with me into the labyrinth, before the sword, before the string. There was sorrow. Long ago, two cities stood across the sea from each other.
Athens and Crete. Athens, wise, noble, proud.
Crete, rich, ancient, ruled by a king who wore crowns like armor. His name was Minos, and once he lost a son. A tragedy, born of pride and accident, led to the death of Androgeus, Minos' heir. But kings, when grieving, do not weep, they curse. Minos raised his voice to the gods, and his ships to the sea. And when his war with Athens ended, he demanded something cruel. Every 9 years, send me 7 young men and 7 young women, and feed them to the labyrinth. Some whispered it was Daedalus, the great inventor.
Others said it was shaped by madness. A maze beneath the palace.
Twisting, turning.
No wall the same. No path repeated, no escape. And deep in its center, a beast. half man, half bull, all hunger, the Minotaur. Born from a curse, raised in shadow, and fed with trembling steps of strangers who would never see the sun again.
Now we meet our prince, Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens, brave, handsome, fierce in his heart, but gentle in gaze. He grew up hearing the stories of the labyrinth, of the lost, of the shame his people bore every 9 years. And so when the next tribute was called, Theseus did not protest. He volunteered, not as a martyr, not as a fool, but as a promise.
"I will go," he said.
"And I will end it." His father wept, but the ship sailed. 14 young souls, and one dream too bold to name aloud. Crete welcomed the tributes with gold and silence. Their fate was known, but someone else was watching. Not a soldier,
Not a god or girl.
her name was Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, raised in stone halls, promised to another prince she did not love.
Surrounded by power, but starved of purpose.
And when she saw Theseus, tall, steady, unafraid, something stirred inside her. Not love, not yet, but recognition. He was not like the others.
He would not die in the dark.
Let us step deeper into the labyrinth now. The air grows colder, the walls close in, and a single thread becomes the only path through darkness. Still raining outside, still quiet here with us. There are stories told in the sunlight and stories whispered in the dark. This one belongs to both. That night, before the tributes were led below, Theseus stood alone in the palace courtyard. He looked at the stars, silent gods who offered no help, and in the stillness she came.
Ariadne. No crown. No veil. Just eyes like candlelight, steady and afraid.
She held out her hand. In it a ball of thread, soft, simple.
Nothing like a weapon. "Take this," she whispered.
Tie it at the entrance,
"Unwind it as you go."
and if you survive, it will lead you home. He looked at her, uncertain, but she didn't flinch, because something in her needed to believe that someone, anyone, could defeat the dark her father built. Theseus took the thread, and for the first time she smiled. They were led down stone steps.
One by one, torches flickered.
The scent of damp rock and old fear clung to the air. The gates closed behind them. The silence pressed in. Theseus tied the thread at the entrance, breathed slowly and walked forward. The walls twisted, the ceilings lowered. Shadows played tricks. Every step echoed louder than the last. He passed Bone's old cloth, a cracked bronze sword. Memories of those who walked before him and never walked out. But he didn't stop.
And then he heard it.
Breathing, not human.
Not animal, something in between.
The Minotaur, its hooves scraped the stone. Its breath steamed in the cold. Its eyes reflected no light. It had waited not out of hunger, but loneliness for years. It had known only the maze.
Only echoes, only terror.
And now a challenge. Theseus didn't run, he didn't shout. He lowered himself into a stance, shield in one hand, short blade in the other. The Minotaur charged, horned heavy.
Hollow-eyed, stone cracked beneath its weight.
Its roar shook the walls. But Theseus was quick. He dodged.
Struck, bled. They clashed in silence.
No cheers, no glory. Just 2 lives in a place meant for death. And in the end, Theseus stood, bruised, breathless. The beast fell, not with a scream, not with a curse, but with a soft, confused exhale, like something waking up for the last time. Theseus followed the thread. It tugged like a lifeline. Turn after turn, it led him back to the gates, to the others and to Ariadne, waiting in the shadows. He didn't speak, he just reached for her hand. Together they ran, not toward victory, but toward a new story.
One without mazes, without monsters.
Without kings, or so they thought. Let the rain fall softer now, as if it too remembers what comes next. Because not all stories end in triumph. Some end in silence, in footprints left on sand, and someone never coming back. They left the labyrinth behind, but some mazes follow you. Theseus and Ariadne fled Crete in the dead of night. The stars hid behind clouds. The oars sliced through black water. Neither spoke much. Perhaps they were afraid the silence would break something delicate between them, or perhaps they were both too tired to speak at all. She had given him everything, her trust, her secret, her home. He had given her freedom. It felt like enough, for now. The wind carried them toward Naxos, a quiet island covered in olive trees and low, sleeping hills. There they would rest, regroup, begin again. That was the plan. Naxos was still. No soldiers, no curses, no kings. Just sea foam and sunlight and a bed of moss beneath the trees. Ariadne smiled more in those few days than she had in years. She danced barefoot. She traced new constellations in the sky. She began to believe in the shape of a new life. And Theseus watched. But something in him had shifted. Not coldness, not cruelty. Just distance, a flicker of doubt. The creeping voice of prophecy. Because heroes don't always know what to do after the monster is dead. One night, while she slept beneath the branches, Theseus stood alone on the shore. The ship was ready, the wind had returned, and in his chest a storm gathered. Some say the gods whispered to him. Others say he feared what would come if he returned to Athens with a foreign princess by his side.
Whatever the reason, he left.
Without a word, without a touch. The boat slipped away from shore, and Ariadne was alone. She awoke with birdsong in her hair. The sea glistened, the sun was kind, but the ship was gone. No footprints, no note, no goodbye, just the soft, endless hush of waves and the weight of realization. Her heart didn't break like glass. It sank, slowly,
Heavily, like something tied to the bottom of the ocean.
Some say she wept until the gods took pity. That Dionysus, god of wine and madness, found her there, broken and beautiful, and lifted her into the stars. Others say she walked into the sea and became part of its tide. What is certain is that she was forgotten by the world that once needed her.
And Theseus, he returned home.
But in his grief, either from guilt or divine punishment, he forgot to change the sails. Black instead of white.
And when his father saw them from the cliffs of Athens, he thought his son had died.
So he threw himself into the sea, and the sea was named after him, the Aegean. Now we step into a story woven with seasons, shadow, and the ache of separation. A tale not of war, but of longing, of a girl plucked from spring and turned into a queen beneath the earth. Let the rain continue, let the world grow quieter.
And let us follow the footsteps of Persephone.
Before she wore a crown of obsidian, she wore daisies in her hair. She was born in sunlight, Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of grain and growth.
A girl made of laughter and wind.
She danced through meadows, she braided flowers into halos. She knew nothing of endings.
Only bloom, only spring.
The world turned gentle where she walked, and the air followed her like a song. Demeter adored her, watched her like moonlight watches a tide. She would not let harm touch her child, not even a shadow, but mothers cannot watch forever, and spring cannot last all year. Far beneath the meadows, Hades sat on his throne of ash and bone, king of the underworld, lord of silence, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, feared but not worshipped. He ruled the realm of the dead, not with cruelty, but with distance. He was not wicked, just alone.
And one day, he looked up and saw her, Persephone.
A flicker of colour above his grey domain, a laugh like rain on stone, a presence so alive it made even death hold its breath. And something ancient stirred in him, not hunger, not lust, but longing. The day began like any other. Persephone wandered far from her mother's side, chasing butterflies, humming to herself. In a field of wild narcissus she bent down to pick a flower, a bloom so white it looked like starlight made soft, and as her fingers touched the petals, the earth opened. Not a crack, not a tremor, a chasm,
Silent, sudden.
swallowing. A black chariot rose from the depths, pulled by horses of smoke and flame, and before her scream could reach the sky, he took her. The earth closed behind them.
No one saw, no one heard.
just a flutter of petals drifting in the breeze. Persephone fell into shadow, down, down, where roots tangled and ghosts whispered. Hades did not speak. He held her, gently but firmly, in the chariot's dark curve. She did not cry, not yet, only watched as the sun vanished above her, and the silence of the underworld swallowed her name. Demeter searched across hills, through valleys, beneath rivers. She called her daughter's name until even the trees bowed in mourning. But there was no answer.
And in her grief, she let the crops die.
The fields turned to dust, the fruit withered, the world grew hungry, because without Persephone there was no spring.
Only aching, only absence, only cold. Let us follow her now, into the hush of the underworld.
Into the stillness beneath all living things, where time moves differently and even shadows learn to listen. They say the underworld has no clocks.
Only silence and slow decisions.
Persephone was not locked in a dungeon. No chains, no iron gates. She walked the halls of Erebus, vast and endless, lit with pale blue flame. The walls shimmered like onyx. The air was cool and still and endless. Hades did not force her smile. He did not speak much. But he offered her everything, a throne beside his, a crown forged of starless night, a realm where every soul passed, where secrets curled in the corners of every corridor. She said nothing at first, just walked, just listened, just existed, until something inside her began to shift. They spoke sometimes, not like lovers, not like captor and captive, just two beings alone. Why me? She once asked, not with anger, but curiosity. Hades had no answer that would make sense in words. He simply said, quietly, "Because I saw you."
And something in me remembered light.
And though she didn't understand, she didn't turn away. Time passed, or perhaps it didn't. But one day, a servant brought her a bowl.
And in it lay a single pomegranate.
Split open, glowing red in the candlelight. Seeds like drops of blood.
Like something sacred, Persephone, curious, took one. Then another.
She ate 6, sweet sharp.
Strange, and as the juice touched her tongue, fate clicked shut like a latch.
'Cause the underworld has rules, and those who eat the food of the dead must always return. Above, Demeter's mourning had become unbearable. The world had grown barren, snow-covered once fruitful lands. People cried to the skies, and the gods finally listened. Zeus, seeing the suffering of both Earth and Olympus, sent a message. Return the girl, or let the world die. Hades, hearing the decree, did not argue. Instead, he offered a choice. And when Persephone stood between them, between the sun and the shadow, she made one. Because she had eaten 6 seeds, she would spend 6 months in the underworld, and 6 months above, half a year with her mother.
Half a year as queen of the dead. And so the world changed.
When she rose, flowers bloomed. When she fell, leaves dropped. Her footsteps became the calendar.
Her journey, the rhythm of seasons.
She was no longer just the maiden of meadows. She had seen silence, sat beside shadows, learned how to rule, how to wait, how to carry both grief and grace.
She was Persephone, not stolen.
Not lost, not broken, but transformed. And now we turn to one of the most well-known names in all of myth. But not the version with shouts and thunder. Not the hero roaring in battle. No, this is a quiet tale. Of pain, of punishment.
Of strength that doesn't just lift mountains, but lifts a broken heart.
The rain still falls, the fire still hums.
And a boy is about to become something more.
Before he was a hero, he was a boy with blood on his hands. They called him Hercules in the old tongue, or Hercules, as the Romans would later say. Born of Zeus, king of the gods, and Alcmene, a mortal woman, a child of strength, blessed with power no man could match, cursed with a destiny no child should bear. From his first breath he was watched, praised by men, feared by gods, and hated by one above all others. Hera, wife of Zeus, queen of Olympus, she saw in him not a boy, but a stain, and she would not forget. He grew strong, faster than the wind.
stronger than oxen, able to wrestle lions before he could read.
But strength does not protect the mind. And when Hera's jealousy ripened, she struck not with lightning, but with madness. A whisper, deep and slow, wound through his thoughts. A fog crept behind his eyes, and in a moment of horror, he killed his wife, his children, his home, not in rage, not even in memory. He woke and the world was red, and the silence that followed would never leave him. There was no jail that could hold him.
No sword sharp enough to punish what he'd done.
So he went to the oracle at Delphi and asked, "What must I do? To be clean again?" And the gods answered, "Serve King Eurystheus. Complete 10 labors, survive what no man has survived."
And maybe you'll earn peace. 10 tasks.
And 12, then history. But he didn't argue. He bowed his head and walked to his punishment. His first trial led him to the hills of Nemea, where a lion had made a kingdom of fear. Not just any lion, its fur could not be pierced.
No sword, no spear, no arrow could cut it.
The villagers prayed, the soldiers failed, and so Hercules came alone.
He found the beast in a cave.
Yellow eyes glowing, teeth like daggers. It roared, not with hunger, but with challenge. And Hercules did not run. He threw down his sword, cast away his bow, and met the lion with bare hands. It clawed, it bit. But he did not fall. He wrestled it as the sky turned grey, as his arms bled, as his breath grew short. And in the end, he broke its neck, slowly, gently.
Like putting a suffering thing to sleep. He could not skin it with blades.
So he used its own claws, and from its pelt he made a cloak, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even monsters can be tamed.
That guilt can become armor. That pain can keep you warm.
Let's continue walking alongside Hercules, not with trumpets and cheers, but with tired footsteps, deep breaths, and the quiet understanding that redemption is never easy. The rain still whispers, the weight still rests on his shoulders, and the path stretches far ahead. Some tasks are impossible, others are just unkind. In the murky waters of Lerna, where death had more than one face, and where Hercules faced a creature that couldn't simply be overpowered. The Hydra did not roar, it hissed, a sound like steam from the cracks of the underworld. Its 9 heads rose slowly from the mire, some snapping, some watching.
Its breath wilted trees, its blood poisoned the ground.
Hercules approached, torch in one hand, sword in the other. But he knew strength wouldn't be enough. Every time he cut off a head, 2 more sprang up, spitting, thrashing, seething. The more he fought, the worse it became.
Until he stopped and listened.
Then he remembered what fire could do. He called for his companion, Iolaus, who stood nearby, and together they worked in rhythm.
Hercules struck, 1 head fell.
Iolaus pressed a torch to the wound. No head returned.
Strike, burn.
Silence, strike, burn, silence. Until only the final, immortal head remained, one that could not die. Hercules didn't cut it. He crushed it beneath a great stone and buried it beneath the swamp's surface so it would never rise again. The Hydra was gone, but from that day on, Hercules dipped his arrows in its blood.
A gift from death for death.
Not all labors were beasts, some were humiliation. King Eurystheus, jealous of Hercules' glory, gave him a task meant not to kill, but to shame. He pointed to the Augean stables, home to over 1,000 immortal cattle, never cleaned for 30 years. The filth was legendary, the stench almost alive.
Hercules walked in and didn't flinch.
He didn't scoop, he didn't scrape. He changed the landscape. He knocked down 2 walls of the stable. Then he dug trenches, redirected the flow of 2 mighty rivers.
Water thundered in, sweeping out decades of filth in minutes.
It was brilliant, efficient, clean, but the king refused to count it as a true labor. You used nature, he scoffed. You didn't suffer, but Hercules didn't care.
'Cause sometimes cleverness was cleaner than blood.
And he had more labors waiting. Next came beauty, not battle. A golden deer sacred to Artemis, swift as moonlight, untouchable by man. He chased it for a year. Through mountains, through forests, through snow. He never harmed it.
Only caught it and let it go.
Even gods took notice then, because Hercules was more than strong. He was patient. Let's continue walking with him. The muscles didn't tire, but the soul did. And beneath every roar, every victory, there was something quieter. A man trying to be more than his past.
Trying to prove he was more than the blood on his hands.
So let's keep going. The rain still falls.
And the world still watches.
Not all monsters bite, some fly. Some whisper, some live inside the chest. High in the snow-covered mountains of Arcadia, a boar roamed, massive, unstoppable. Its tusks curved like scythes and its rage shattered trees. The people of the nearby villages lived in fear, their footsteps muffled by snow, their children kept indoors with no songs and no fire. And so Hercules climbed up through ice and mist.
Alone, listening for the crackle of frozen branches beneath hoof.
He didn't kill the beast. He didn't need to. He waited, tracked, lured it into deep snow where its speed failed. Then he grabbed it by the tusks and lifted, not out of cruelty, but as proof. He bound its legs, carried it down the mountainside, through quiet trees, through silent awe. And when King Eurystheus saw him arrive, holding the snarling boar over his shoulders, he hid inside a bronze jar.
'Cause even kings know fear.
And even courage looks like madness when you've never had to earn it. Next came feathers, claws, metal. In the swamps of Stymphalia, birds not born of nature took flight, created by Ares, god of war. These were no ordinary birds. Their wings were blades. Their beaks could pierce armor. Their droppings, yes, even those were poison. No man could reach them. No arrow could find them in the fog. So Hercules did what he always did. He found another way. He was given a gift by Athena this time. A pair of bronze clappers forged by Hephaestus himself. When he struck them together, the sound split the sky. The birds shrieked, panicked,
flew from the trees, and in that moment, Hercules fired arrow after arrow, each tipped in Hydra's blood.
One by one, the sky emptied until silence returned. Even the wind seemed careful not to speak.
They called him a hero, a savior, a demigod.
But no one asked how he slept, how it felt to wake with red still beneath his nails, how it felt to see the faces of his children only in dreams, only in regret. He never spoke of it. He just moved to the next task. Because redemption is a staircase carved in stone. And every step cuts deeper. Let's continue. The rain still lingers like breath on glass. And Hercules walks on into stranger lands, where not every beast has fur, and not every enemy has claws. Sometimes the hardest labors are the ones that change you. Strength can carry you far. But what happens when you start to wonder why you're still walking? Far to the north, in the shadow of the Thracian plains, King Diomedes kept horses. Not majestic, not gentle. These were man-eating mares, wild-eyed,
foaming at the mouth, their breath hot with the taste of human flesh.
He fed them with prisoners, let them feast on fear. When Hercules arrived, he did not draw his sword. He watched the king, watched the madness behind his smile, and then he turned the punishment inward. He fed Diomedes to his own horses, not with rage, with justice. And when the mares had eaten, they were calm.
As if the sickness had been the man, not the beast.
Next he crossed the sea, to the land of the Amazons. Warrior women, daughters of Ares, as fierce as they were wise. Hercules came for Hippolyta's belt, a gift from the gods, worn as a symbol of her strength and rule. He didn't want it, but the king demanded it. So Hercules asked, and Hippolyta said yes. She welcomed him, listened to him,
saw the weight he carried.
But Hera, watching from above, was not pleased. She whispered lies, turned the Amazons against him, turned peace into panic. Blades clashed, horses screamed, and in the confusion, Hippolyta died, not because she was weak, But because the gods would not let Hercules find peace without pain, he took the belt, but he left part of himself behind. Another crack in a heart already patched with scar tissue. By now Hercules no longer smiled. Each labor completed brought no joy. Just another step forward, another echo behind him. He carried armor made of victories. But his eyes grew heavier, not with exhaustion, but with memory. Now we approach the final stretch, not of strength, but of endurance, where Hercules is no longer proving his might, but his willingness to go further than anyone ever has, even into the world beyond life. So let's walk with him. One last quiet climb before the storm. By now, even the gods were watching in silence. Far across the sea, at the very edge of the world, lived Geryon, a creature with 3 bodies fused at the waist, guarding a herd of crimson cattle. To reach him, Hercules had to cross the scorching desert. The sun beat down for days, so fiercely in fact that Hercules, in a rare moment of defiance, fired an arrow at the sky. And Helios, god of the sun, laughed. He admired the madness and gave Hercules his golden cup, a vessel that could cross oceans. Hercules sailed west, fought Geryon, killed him, not with spectacle, just determination, and drove the cattle all the way back to Greece, step by step, with no songs, just hoofbeats and dust. Next came the garden that no mortal had ever touched, hidden beyond the known world, guarded by nymphs, and coiled in the branches, a serpent that never slept. The apples shimmered gold. They were not food. They were divine knowledge. Even Hercules didn't know how to reach them. So he did something unexpected. He asked for help. He found Atlas, the titan doomed to hold up the heavens. Atlas, strong and tired, agreed to help, but only if Hercules would hold the sky in his place. And so he did. For a time, the strongest man in myth held the weight of the entire world.
And he said nothing. He simply stood silent beneath the stars. Atlas returned with the apples,
but tried to leave Hercules beneath the sky forever. So Hercules, with calm eyes, tricked him. "Just take it back for a moment," he said. "Let me adjust the padding." And when Atlas did, Hercules walked away. Sometimes strength is muscle, sometimes it's the ability to wait. At last, the 12th labor.
not a creature of this world, but one from below.
Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of the underworld, guardian of the dead, made of shadow, smoke, and rage. Hercules entered the realm of Hades, not with sword, not with torch, but with respect. He did not sneak, he asked. Hades agreed, on one condition. You must take him without weapons. And so Hercules did. He faced the beast, let it snap, let it bite, and wrapped his arms around its necks, not to choke, but to hold until it understood. Until it yielded, he led Cerberus into the light, and then returned him home, because even the dead deserve their guardian. 12 impossible tasks, each survived, each carried. Hercules was free, but freedom did not bring peace. Because what do you do after you've done everything? Where do you walk when the road ends? And what do you carry when the sword is sheathed? Now we step into a different kind of story, not of strength, but of song.
Not of war, but of love so deep it dared to descend into death itself.
Let the rain fall softer now.
'Cause this is a story made of music and silence.
Some love stories live forever, not because they ended well, but because they couldn't. His name was Orpheus. He didn't lift mountains. He didn't slay beasts. He played the lyre. And when he did, the world listened. Birds paused mid-flight. Rivers slowed to hear. Even the trees leaned in closer. He was the son of Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, and his music was not just art. It was power, it was peace. And in that music, someone heard him. Someone whose heart would beat with his until the very end. Eurydice was not a goddess, not a warrior, just a girl with soft eyes and quiet steps. She loved to walk barefoot, loved the feel of wind in tall grass.
Loved Orpheus. They were not dramatic, not loud, just together.
And when he played, she watched him like the stars watched the sea. He wrote songs for her. She planted flowers for him. They married beneath the trees. The whole forest seemed to breathe with them. It should have lasted forever. But the gods, as always, had other plans. No lightning, no storm. Just a snake, hidden in the grass, sharp and quiet. It bit her ankle as she danced near the woods. She cried out once, then fell. The world did not shatter, it just stopped. By the time Orpheus reached her, she was gone. The grass still swayed, the breeze still hummed, but her hand was cold. Orpheus did not weep, not loudly. He did not rage. He picked up his lyre and walked. He walked past temples, past towns, past prayer. He walked to the edge of the world, where souls whisper and rivers forget your name. And he kept going because love doesn't stop at death. Let's go with him now, into the place where no living soul belongs, led only by music and love that refuses to let go. The rain still falls, but down here, it's the silence that speaks loudest. Most who enter the underworld never leave, but Orpheus brought something no one else did, a melody born from grief. At the shore of the river Styx, Orpheus waited. Charon, the boatman, said nothing, just stared with hollow eyes. But Orpheus didn't plead, he played. A quiet tune, low and aching, full of things words couldn't say. Charon, for the first time in eternity, paused.
And then nodded. The boat creaked.
The water stilled, and the living man crossed into the land of the dead. Cerberus stood at the gates. 3 heads, 1 body.
All teeth, he growled. A sound like mountains shifting. Orpheus didn't fight, he played.
A lullaby soft and slow.
Not for battle, but for sleep.
And one by one the heads lowered, the eyes closed.
And the guardian of the dead let him pass, 'cause even beasts know mourning.
At the heart of the underworld sat Hades, king of shadows, and beside him Persephone, whose eyes held both winter and spring. They watched Orpheus enter, watched him kneel. He did not beg, he did not demand, he simply played. He played their story of sunlight on a wedding day,
Of dancing feet and warm breath, of laughter cut short, of grass stained red.
of a hand slipping away. He played the sound of her name and the silence after. And when the song ended, no one spoke, not even the dead. Persephone wept. Hades looked away, and then he said, "You may take her back, but you must not look at her until you reach the surface. If you do, she will be lost to you forever." He found her, Eurydice, quiet and pale. She followed him, step by step.
One behind the other. They didn't speak, they couldn't.
The tunnel stretched long, the darkness pressed in, and Orpheus kept walking. But in his heart, doubt grew like a thorn. He couldn't hear her footsteps. He couldn't feel her breath. What if she wasn't there? What if it was a trick? What if he was alone? And just before the final step into the light, just before freedom, he turned. She was there, eyes wide, reaching, but the moment he saw her, she was pulled back, like smoke in reverse, like a memory swallowed by night. She did not scream, she just disappeared. This time, there was no second chance. Let's continue. This time, the story is softer, but no less lonely. It begins not with a curse, but with a sculptor and a shape made from stone that somehow began to feel like something more. Let the rain fall gently, let the candles flicker, and listen to the silence between each heartbeat. He carved her from ivory, but somewhere along the way, his own heart softened first. His name was Pygmalion, a man of great skill.
A sculptor, a thinker, a dreamer. He lived alone by choice.
Not because he hated the world, but because it never felt quite real to him. People laughed too loudly, loved too carelessly.
Promised too easily. He wanted something truer.
So he turned to marble and ivory. He shaped things that wouldn't lie, wouldn't break, wouldn't leave. And one day, he began carving something different. He did not name her at first.
She was just an idea, a woman graceful.
Still perfect. Not perfect in beauty, but in balance. Every curve held quiet, every feature carried peace.
As he carved, he forgot to eat, forgot to sleep.
He touched her face with chisel and cloth, and something in him trembled. He made her hands gentle. Her mouth closed but soft, as if she were just about to speak. And when he finished, he could not look away. She sat in his workshop,
Not on a pedestal, but in a chair.
like someone waiting, listening. He brought her flowers, draped her in fabric. He talked to her.
Not madness, not quite.
He simply needed someone to listen, and she never interrupted. He began to wonder if maybe the gods had made a mistake, that perhaps souls belong not only in flesh and blood, but in devotion. During the festival of Aphrodite, goddess of love, Pygmalion brought a simple offering, a handful of rose petals and one whispered prayer. I don't ask for beauty, or passion, or praise.
Only this, let me love and be loved, even if by a shadow of my own creation.
He didn't expect an answer. But sometimes gods are quiet until they are not. Let's return to his workshop now, where nothing seems to move, and yet something has changed. The rain still whispers against the windows, but inside, a statue is beginning to remember the feeling of skin. Some love is loud. This one began as a quiet breath beneath ivory skin. Pygmalion returned from the temple, his heart full and hollow at once. He did not expect the goddess to hear, certainly not to answer. But when he stepped into his studio, he paused.
Nothing looked different, not at first.
She was still there, his statue, still and silent, just as he had left her. But the air had changed, warmer.
More alive, he moved closer.
He reached for her hand, not to sculpt, not to polish, just to hold, and it wasn't cold.
Not stone cold anyway, not like before.
There was a softness. He blinked, shook his head, touched her cheek.
And there, again warmth, faint but real.
He stepped back, afraid to hope, afraid not to. Then her fingers twitched, just once.
As if in a dream.
She didn't open her eyes right away. First came breath, a soft, shallow gasp like the sound of wind catching on silk. Then a shift in her chest, ribs moving, as if her body had remembered how to be alive before her mind had.
And then her eyes opened.
Not wide, not startled, just curious. She looked at him, and he saw not recognition but wonder. She did not speak. She didn't have to. Her gaze said, "Where am I? Who are you? What is this feeling between us?" And he, trembling, whispered, "You're real." She didn't answer, but her hand closed gently over his, and that was enough. Far away, in realms not seen by mortal eyes, Aphrodite watched. She did not shout her blessing. She didn't make the sky sing, she simply smiled. Because love like this, the kind born not of want but of quiet creation, was rare.
And it deserved to breathe. He named her Galatea.
And slowly, she learned the world. Through music, through movement, through morning light warming her face. She asked few questions and he gave few answers.
Because not everything sacred needs to be explained.
Sometimes it just needs to be held.
Now, we turn our gaze to the sky.
To a boy with wings made of dreams. To a father who meant to protect him. And to the sunlight that always burns brightest, right before the fall. Let the rain fall like feathers now. Because this is a story of freedom, flight, and the cost of reaching too far. Before the fall there was flight, and before the flight there was a cage. High above the sea, on the island of Crete, stood a tower built by a king afraid of secrets. King Minos had hired the genius Daedalus, inventor, craftsman, architect of wonders, to build the labyrinth that held the Minotaur. But afterward he locked Daedalus away, not out of cruelty but out of fear. He wanted no other kingdom to know what Daedalus had created.
And so Daedalus was imprisoned with his son, Icarus, a boy born of sky and curiosity.
Too young to be bitter, too bold to be afraid, they lived in silence. But Daedalus's mind was never still. He watched the birds, the wind, the way feathers danced and never broke. And one night he whispered to his son, "We cannot escape by land,
Nor by sea, so we will go by sky."
Icarus didn't laugh, he believed him. 'Cause when you grow up in a prison, even impossible things feel worth chasing. Daedalus worked in secret, feathers, wax, thread, each piece shaped by memory and precision.
Not just art, survival.
2 pairs of wings, one large, one smaller. Icarus held his in awe. He ran his fingers along each line. "Will they carry us?" Daedalus didn't answer. He only looked at the sky. On the morning of escape, Daedalus tied the wings to his son's back. Not too tight, not too loose. And he said, "Fly not too low, or the sea will pull you in. But fly not too high, or the sun will melt the wax." Icarus nodded, but in his eyes the sky had already opened. They leapt, and for the first time in their lives, they didn't fall. They rose, wings slicing through salt air.
Wind lifting them like prayers. They flew above the cliffs over the sea.
Beyond the reach of Minos' walls, fishermen dropped their nets to watch. Sailors pointed, children gasped. Father and son, defying the world together. Let's follow him now, into the open sky, where freedom feels eternal, and warnings sound like whispers. But even in dreams, there are limits, and the higher you fly, the farther you have to fall. At first, the wind felt like music, but even music ends. For a while, there was only joy. Icarus laughed as he soared, not like a bird, but like something newer, wilder. Wings wide, eyes bright.
No ceiling, no floor, only the sky.
He spun in the air, dipped, climbed, chased his own shadow across the sea. Daedalus flew beside him, steady and quiet.
He called out, "Not so high."
But Icarus barely heard him, because in his heart he was no longer just a boy. The sun rose higher, golden, glorious, hungry. Its light wrapped around Icarus like a crown.
And he leaned into it.
Wings stretched, face tilted upward. He felt invincible, weightless. The warmth was beautiful, and then it was too much. The wax began to soften, first slowly, then quickly. Feathers shifted, edges curled. One floated past his face, and then another. His smile faded. He looked to his arms. The wings were unraveling. He reached out to steady himself, but there was nothing to hold.
And suddenly, but he was falling.
The wind that once lifted him now roared in his ears. The sky, once infinite, shrunk into a blur of blue, and the ocean waited, not cruelly.
Not hungrily, just patiently.
He didn't scream, he didn't beg. He just closed his eyes and thought of the moment he first left the ground. Daedalus turned just in time to see the final splash. Just one, no waves.
No struggle. The sea swallowed his son like it had been waiting.
And Daedalus, high above, kept flying.
Not because he wanted to,
but because he had to. Because the only thing heavier than wings is grief. They called it the Icarian Sea, where the boy had fallen. And somewhere, deep below, the feathers still drift. Not as failure, not as warning, but as proof that someone once tried to touch the sun. Let's turn now to a gentler tale. Not of heroes or curses, not of flight or fire, but of kindness, of 2 old souls, a humble home, and the gods who came knocking. Let the rain fall like old memories now.
Soft, slow.
Because this is a story of love that didn't seek attention, and for that reason was remembered forever.
Not all legends begin in palaces. Some begin with a knock on a crooked door.
In a quiet village at the edge of forgotten hills, there lived 2 old people. Baucis, the wife, Philemon, her husband. They were poor, but not bitter. Their roof leaked, their chairs creaked, but they smiled often and gave thanks for things most people overlooked. A warm fire, a shared loaf of bread, a place to rest their bones.
One evening, as dusk wrapped the hills in mist, there was a knock at the door.
2 strangers stood outside, worn cloaks, dusty feet, tired eyes. They had knocked on 100 doors that day and been turned away every time. No one had room, no one had food, no one wanted trouble. But Baucis and Philemon didn't hesitate. They opened the door, smiled, said, "No, come in. You must be tired. Sit." The The cottage was small, the table smaller, but Baucis placed her best cloth on it anyway. Philemon poured water. She added a splash of wine. They served olives, cheese, a few figs. Not a feast, but offered with full hearts.
And the strangers, they ate.
Quietly, gratefully. And something strange happened. The wine pitcher never emptied. The bread basket never ran out. No matter how much they poured or passed, the food remained. Baucis and Philemon exchanged a glance, not of fear, but of understanding. Something divine was happening. The strangers stood,
And their cloaks fell away.
no longer worn travelers, but gods.
Zeus, king of the sky, and Hermes, messenger of the divine.
They looked not angry, not prideful, but soft, grateful. Zeus spoke. This village turned us away, but you gave us everything. You will be rewarded. And behind them, the entire village began to sink, swallowed by earth and water, all except for the little cottage. Let's return to that little cottage, now the only thing standing where a village used to be, a place of warmth, of love, and of a quiet miracle waiting to unfold. The rain still falls like blessings tonight, and the story is not yet over.
True love doesn't need to be loud.
Sometimes it just needs to last. The gods did not just spare the cottage, they transformed it. The old wood turned to marble. The sagging walls stood tall. The creaking floor became polished stone. It was no longer a home, it was a temple. And Zeus turned to Baucis and Philemon and said, "This temple is yours to guard. As long as you live, it will stand with you." And they did. The old couple, once ignored by the world, became its quiet protectors. Not priests, not saints. Just two souls who never stopped welcoming others. Time moved gently after that. They swept the temple floors, tended the garden, lit a lamp at dusk. They never asked for more. They never wanted less. Their hands grew older, but their hearts stayed steady. And one morning, as the sun warmed the steps of the temple, Zeus returned one final time. "You have been faithful. Is there any wish I may grant you?" The couple looked at each other, and Philemon spoke, "Let us not outlive one another.
Let neither bury the other.
Let us leave the world together." The gods said nothing, but they heard. And years later, on a quiet afternoon, as the breeze rustled the olive trees, Baucis felt her hands turn to bark. Philemon reached for her, and his fingers grew into branches. They did not panic, they only smiled. They had lived well, loved well, and now side by side they would grow. Two trees twined together, one oak, one linden, rooted in the earth, reaching toward the sky. Forever part of the land they once welcomed strangers into. Even now, travelers say that in a quiet grove near an ancient ruin, two trees grow side by side. Their trunks touch, their branches whisper, and if the wind is just right, you might hear something like a greeting.
Not a miracle, not a legend. Just two voices, still together. Let's run now, not away but forward.
Into a story of speed, strength, and a girl who refused to slow down for anyone until love changed the race. Let the rain patter like footsteps through leaves. This is the story of Atalanta, the wild girl, the swift runner, and the heart she didn't know was waiting at the finish line. Before the race, there was the forest, and a girl who never learned to be small. When she was born, Atalanta was unwanted. A king had hoped for a son, and when he saw a daughter, he left her on the mountain to die. But the forest had other plans.
A mother bear found her.
Nudged her, fed her, and in time, Atalanta learned to run not like a princess, but like wind between trees. She grew strong, lean, quiet when she wanted to be, loud when she didn't. She could track a deer across stones, climb a tree in silence.
Fire an arrow before her breath hit the ground.
Men heard rumors, a wild girl with golden hair.
Faster than fox's eyes like morning frost.
But when they came to find her, they couldn't catch her.
And those who tried to catch her heart?
They were laughed back into the trees. Eventually, she left the mountains, not because she was tamed, But because the world whispered to her there are other forests to run through, she joined heroes, fought beasts, won races, broke expectations. She was as deadly with a bow as she was beautiful. And she hated both things being pointed out. Men called her a marvel.
A mystery, a challenge.
But she was just herself, nothing more and nothing less. Her father, yes, the one who left her, eventually tried to reclaim her. Now that she was famous, he wanted a legacy again. He pushed for marriage. She refused. But to silence him, she made a deal. Any man who wants to marry me must beat me in a race.
If he loses, then he dies.
Many tried, all failed. And their bones, or their shame, were left behind.
Let's run with her now. One last race through the morning mist, where pride meets patience, and love doesn't shout. It simply waits.
The rain still falls, light as breath, and the path ahead curves towards something she never expected.
She never lost a race. Not because no one was fast enough, but because no one ever made her one stop.
His name was Hippomenes, not the strongest,
Not the richest, not the boldest.
but clever and kind. He watched her race, not with arrogance, but with admiration. He didn't see a prize to win. He saw a soul who had never been met at her own speed. And he whispered a prayer to Aphrodite, "Help me reach her."
Not just her feet, her heart.
Aphrodite heard him. She gave him 3 golden apples, smooth and heavy, shimmering with divine temptation.
Drop these only when you must, she said.
Don't race to conquer, race to be seen. And so he stepped forward, challenged her, met her gaze, and Atalanta smiled. Not because she thought he'd win, but because something in his stillness was familiar. They stood side by side, she barefoot, steady. He nervous, holding his breath.
And then they ran. Her stride was effortless, fluid, beautiful.
But he was focused, not to outrun her, but to understand her. At just the right moment, he dropped the first apple. She saw it, paused.
Only for a heartbeat.
But it was enough. He dropped another. It rolled across the path, glowing in sunlight. She hesitated again, not for the apple, but for the question behind it. Why are you trying to distract me, and why do I care? The third came near the end. He waited until he could feel her breath at his shoulder, and dropped it with a prayer, not a tactic. She stopped, not for the gold, but because somehow she wanted him to win. He crossed the line. She arrived just after. There were no cheers, no music,
Only her looking at him.
and saying, "You didn't win because I slowed down. You won because I wanted to see where you were going." And he said, "Wherever you are." They married not because he proved something, but because he didn't try to prove anything. They were not loud lovers.
Not dramatic, just matched.
2 people who had run through the world alone and finally found someone worth stopping for. Let's go now, Mobor. Not into battle, not into the sky, but into the quiet heart of Olympus. This is the story of a goddess without thunder or vengeance, without temples of gold or famous lovers. And yet, she was the flame that held it all together. The rain still falls, the hearth still burns. And Hestia is waiting. She had no throne, no war.
No scandal, only warmth, and the choice to be still.
She was the first child of Cronus and Rhea, older than Hera, older than Poseidon.
Even older than Zeus, her name was Hestia.
She was there before the world had shape, before laws were made, before gods took sides. And yet, no one tells her story first, because she didn't want to rule. She wanted to keep the fire lit. Every home had one, a place for warmth. Cooking, gathering, praying. The hearth wasn't just a fire. It was the center of life. And Hestia was the goddess of that center, where families circled, where stories were shared, where silence was safe. She didn't need temples. Every fire was hers. Many gods chased love, war, power. Not Hestia. Apollo asked for her hand. So did Poseidon. She said no to both. Not with cruelty, just calm. She vowed eternal virginity, not out of fear, but out of choice.
She belonged to no one and to everyone.
When Olympus was arranged, 12 thrones were placed around the golden hall. But one day, Dionysus, young and radiant, came to claim a seat. The gods argued, and Hestia, she simply stood up, gave him her place, stepped back, tended the fire in the center.
Because she didn't need a throne to matter.
She was Olympus. She kept its heart beating. Her symbol wasn't a weapon. It was a small flame. And in every sacrifice, every prayer, her name was whispered first and last. Because nothing begins without warmth. And nothing ends well without it either. Now let's open a different kind of story. One wrapped in warnings, in questions. In the soft, dangerous pull of curiosity. She was the first woman.
A gift, a trap, a lesson. Let the rain fall steady now. Because what she opened never fully closed.
They say she ruined everything.
But maybe she was just the first to ask, why not? She was crafted, not born.
Hephaestus molded her from clay, hands as delicate as petals, eyes bright with borrowed starlight. Each god gave her a gift. Aphrodite gave beauty, Hermes gave cleverness, Athena gave grace. But Zeus gave her something else, a purpose, not one she chose, but one he intended.
This wasn't a love story, it was a punishment.
Prometheus had stolen fire for mankind. He had given them warmth, hope, invention. Zeus was furious, and so he sent Pandora, not to Prometheus, but to his brother Epimetheus.
A gift, a bride, wrapped in silk and silence.
And beside her, a jar, sealed,
untouched, mysterious.
And one rule, do not open it. Epimetheus welcomed her. She was kind, gentle, curious. He loved her quickly, easily. But the jar remained in their home. Always nearby, always quiet, always calling. She asked once, "What's inside?" He said, "We're not supposed to know."
But knowing that wasn't enough.
It didn't happen in anger.
Or defiance, just a whisper.
A twitch, a moment too long left alone. She lifted the lid, and the world changed, not light, not treasure, but pain. Sickness, envy, greed, war, cruelty. Each one rose like smoke, like insects with wings buzzing out into the world. She slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. The damage was done. She collapsed, terrified, ashamed.
But then, a whisper.
From inside the jar, small, warm, still there. She opened it again, just a crack, and hope fluttered out, not to erase the others, not to fix what was broken, just to follow them. Because the gods had given humanity all the darkness, but also one light to walk through it. For centuries, they called Pandora the problem, the mistake, the ruin. But she was also the first to be curious, the first to feel regret, the first to open something and still find something worth keeping.
Maybe the story was never about punishment.
Maybe it was about learning how to live with what we let loose. Let's walk now into a story sung by poets, whispered by kings, and burned into the pages of history like flame. This is the story of a woman blamed for a war, called beautiful beyond reason, but almost never allowed to speak for herself. Let the rain fall like ships on the sea. This is the story of Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships and the silence that followed. She didn't ask to be a legend. She just wanted to be something more than a name on a sword. Helen didn't enter the world like others. She was born from an egg. Some say Zeus, in the form of a swan, seduced her mother Leda. Others say it was trickery, fate, or divine cruelty. But when the egg cracked, Helen was inside, already more than mortal, already marked by myth. From the moment she could walk, people watched her.
Not because of what she said,
but because of what she looked like. She became the standard, the symbol, the ideal. Poets praised her lips. Painters chased her shape. No one asked how it felt to be a prize before she was a person. When she came of age, every king wanted her. Men from across the world came to Sparta, princes, warriors, kings, each one offering riches, power, fame. Her father, Tyndareus, feared the bloodshed her choice would bring. So one suitor, clever Odysseus, proposed a solution. Make them swear an oath that no matter who wins, They will protect her choice and fight anyone who threatens it. They agreed, and Helen was married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Whether she loved him, no one ever really asked. Then came Paris, a prince of Troy.
Handsome, soft-spoken, young. The gods were behind it, of course.
Aphrodite had promised him the love of the most beautiful woman on earth. And Helen was already tired of being looked at but not seen, listened to but not heard. So when Paris whispered promises or the choice of escape of being wanted, something in her heart cracked open. Some say she was stolen.
Others say she left. The truth? Maybe even she didn't know.
Menelaus awoke to find her gone, and the oath, the one sworn by kings of all Pia, was called upon. 1,000 ships launched into the sea.
Not just to reclaim a queen, but to defend an agreement.
Helen became a cause, a justification, and no one asked her what she wanted, not anymore. Let's step now into the siege, not into the clash of swords, but into the silence behind the walls. Because while warriors fought and poets sang, Helen stood watching and wondering if anyone still saw her as something more than a flame to feed their legends. The rain still falls beyond the gates of Troy, but inside she waits. They built a war around her name, but no one asked her what it felt like to carry it. Behind the golden walls, Helen lived, not as a queen, not as a goddess,
just as someone trying to breathe.
The people of Troy watched her, some with awe, others with hatred. "You brought this war," they whispered.
"Your face is why our sons bleed."
She didn't argue, she couldn't. Because even when you're not the one swinging the sword, they still carve your name into the blade.
Outside, the war raged.
For 10 years, Achilles, Hector, Patroclus, Odysseus. Each name added a new verse to the song. Each death another chapter in a story she never wrote. They fought for honor, for revenge, for prophecy. But always, her name floated just beneath the surface. Helen of Troy, even though she had never been from Troy, even though she no longer knew where she belonged. She would sit alone, watching the sea. Some days, she touched the glass of her mirror, looking for the girl she had been. Before the crown, before the ships. Before the gods chose her as a lesson, she couldn't find her.
Only a woman draped in silk and blame.
Paris would hold her, tell her she was worth it all, that the war wasn't her fault. But his hands were soft,
and his spine wasn't made for fire.
Sometimes she wondered if he loved her, or just the idea of her Aphrodite had planted in his dreams. And sometimes, in the silence, she missed Menelaus. Not his pride, not his throne, but the version of herself who once lived without being a symbol. They say the walls of Troy never fell by force.
Only by trick, a wooden horse.
A quiet night and fire in the streets. As the city burned, Helen stood on the balcony. She did not run, she did not cry, she just watched. Because sometimes, after years of being blamed for a war, you forget what it means to be innocent. Let's step into the ashes now, where smoke curls around old memories and silence is heavier than armor. The war has ended, the gods are quiet, and Helen stands, still beautiful, still mysterious, but more alone than ever. Let the rain fall like the last tears of a legend. This is the part no one sings about. She outlived the war, but did she ever escape it? The horse had opened, the soldiers had poured out. Troy, once proud and golden, now glowed with fire. Paris was gone, his promises reduced to ash, and Helen stood alone among the ruin. The victors didn't touch her, not out of respect, but out of fear, because beauty that survives war becomes something else entirely. Menelaus found her, sword in hand.
Eyes dark with grief, he had every right to strike her.
To end the story there. But when he looked at her, he didn't see betrayal or fury, he saw time. Time that neither of them would ever get back. "Come home," he said, and she followed. Back in Sparta, she wore the crown once more. She hosted feasts, smiled when expected. But her name still echoed in every hallway. Every child born of the war carried her shadow. She had everything except peace.
And no matter where she walked, someone always whispered, was she worth it? Some say she was stolen. Some say she ran, some say she wanted it all.
But Helen? She never told the world her truth. Because in stories like these, women don't get to explain. They just get remembered. And even memory can be a cage. They say she never aged. That her beauty remained untouched by time. But perhaps she would have traded that beauty for a quiet life, a name unspoken, a body not made into a battlefield. Or maybe she understood something the world didn't, that being wanted and being understood are never the same thing. Now let's enter the dark now. Not the darkness of night, but the kind that coils through corridors, waiting in silence. This is a tale of bravery, yes, but also of fear, of lies hidden beneath palaces, and of one boy who walked into a monster's home with nothing but thread and a promise. Let the rain echo like footsteps on stone. This is the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. Heroes aren't born when they slay monsters. They're born the moment they choose to enter the maze. Crete was beautiful white marble. Blue seas, a king with a crown that never slipped, Minos. But beneath the palace was a secret, a labyrinth designed by Daedalus, so twisted and vast that even wind got lost inside it. And at the center, a monster, half man, half bull. The Minotaur, a thing that should not have lived, and yet was kept alive as punishment.
As warning, Athens owed Crete a debt.
A punishment for an old crime, a war lost long ago. Every 9 years, King Minos demanded a tribute, 7 young men and 7 young women, to be sent into the maze.
To be fed, the people called it sacrifice.
Minos called it law, and no one ever returned. Theseus, Prince of Athens, heard the cries, the silence, the stories.
And he said, I'll go. Not as a gesture, not as a symbol.
But as a promise, if I return, the sails will be white.
If I fall, they will be black.
His father, King Aegeus, begged him not to go. But Theseus had already stepped forward. Because sometimes the only way to end a nightmare is to walk straight into it. The ship sailed. The sea was quiet, too quiet. And the others whispered on the deck, eyes wide, trying not to imagine the dark below Crete's palace. Theseus said little, but he held his sword like it wasn't just a weapon, but a question. And the answer waited in the maze. When they arrived, the city danced. Crete welcomed its guests with music and wine, as if they weren't about to disappear. But one pair of eyes didn't look away. Ariadne, daughter of King Minos. She watched Theseus, not like a girl falling for a prince, but like someone seeing, at last, a way out. And that night, she came to him with a thread. Let's go deeper now, into the dark that twists, turns, and doesn't care whether you're brave or afraid. Theseus has entered the labyrinth, but he is not alone. There's a thread in his hand, a promise behind him, and something waiting ahead that was never meant to be understood. Let the rain drip like distant echoes in stone halls. This is the heart of the maze. You don't face monsters to prove you're a hero. You face them because no one else will. Ariadne gave it to him in secret.
A simple spool, thin.
Gold, unbreakable. Tie it at the entrance, she said. Unwind it as you go.
And when it's over, follow it home.
He didn't ask why she was helping, he already knew. Because even the daughter of a king can feel trapped by a father who builds monsters into the basement. Theseus stepped into the maze. The door sealed behind him.
Stone. Final, there was no light. Only touch, only the feel of the thread slipping from his hand like a heartbeat.
The walls twisted, turned. Each step felt like a question. Each silence like a dare. He heard it before he saw it. Breathing, not fast, not wild.
Heavy, slow, ancient. The sound of something that had been alone too long. Then from the shadows, eyes.
Reflecting nothing, seeing everything. The Minotaur stepped forward.
Not roaring, not rushing.
Just being, and Theseus finally understood this wasn't just a monster. It was a curse. It was not elegant, the creature charged. Theseus dodged. They crashed against walls, fell. Grunted, the sword sliced, but not enough. Horn met stone, blood met air.
And then one perfect moment.
The opening, the strike. The Minotaur collapsed, and for the first time in years, the maze was silent. Theseus didn't cheer, didn't speak. He just turned, followed the thread, step by step, out of the dark. Back toward the light. When he emerged, Ariadne was waiting, and the thread, now slack in his hand, was the only thing that had ever led anyone back. They fled together, Theseus and Ariadne, not as king and queen, not as lovers, just as two people who had seen too much of what lies beneath palaces. But destiny isn't always kind to those who steal from kings.
And not every escape stays whole.
Let's walk into the morning after now, and when the battle is over, the shadows have thinned, and all that remains is choice. Theseus is free. Ariadne waits beside him. But sometimes freedom comes with a silence no sword can cut. Let the rain fall softly like forgotten promises. This is how legends say goodbye. You can survive the monster. You can escape the maze. But the hardest part is knowing what comes next. They stopped on a small island, Naxos. The sea was calm, the sky merciful. Theseus and Ariadne rested. She curled beside him, eyes soft, trusting. She had given up her home, her family, her name, for him. But Theseus, he didn't sleep. He stared at the horizon. Something in him was changing, or maybe breaking. At dawn, while she still slept, he rose, stepped onto the ship. No ceremony.
No words. He left her there, on the shore, among wildflowers and sea mist.
Not because she had done wrong, but because he didn't know how to carry her into the life waiting ahead. Some say he was cursed. Some say he panicked. Maybe he just couldn't look her in the eyes and say, "I don't know how to love you without needing you to save me." He sailed back to Athens, alone, and he forgot, or chose to forget, to change the sails. They had agreed, white sails if he lived,
black sails if he died.
The ship approached, black cloth fluttering, and on the cliffs above, King Aegeus, his father, saw the omen. He didn't wait for an explanation. He stepped off the edge, into the sea that would one day bear his name. Theseus returned, a hero. The labyrinth was no more. The Minotaur was gone, but the throne felt heavier than it should have, and two ghosts followed him everywhere. One who had helped him escape, and one who had waited too long on a cliff. The thread is gone, the maze is quiet, but the story still echoes, because even heroes leave pieces of themselves in the places they walk away from. And sometimes, the greatest monsters are the choices you carry after the fight. Let's descend now, but not in fear, but in wonder. This is not a tale of kidnapping, not exactly, nor of innocence lost. This is a story of seasons of longing, of a girl who learned to shape her own kingdom, one step at a time. Let the rain fall like footsteps down stone stairs. We are entering the underworld now, with Persephone. Some queens are born, others are grown in the dark. She was called Kor then, the maiden, daughter of Demeter, the harvest goddess. Child of spring, she bloomed like the flowers she loved, bright, gentle, joyful. The world softened where she walked, and her mother, fierce, loving, watchful, kept her far from sorrow, far from choice, far from change. But flowers are meant to grow, and Kor was starting to reach for something more. One afternoon, in a meadow full of daffodils, the earth cracked open.
Not violently, just wide enough.
A chariot rose from the gap, black horses, midnight wheels, and driving it, Hades, lord of the underworld. He did not shout, did not roar. He simply looked at her and wanted. Not for her body, not for conquest, but for company, for warmth, for something to balance his eternal silence. And in a breath, she was gone. The world grew cold. Demeter searched, refused to let the harvest grow. But far below, in a palace lit by glowing stones, Kor stood quiet. She wasn't weeping, not anymore. She asked questions, listened. And Hades, awkward, gentle in his own quiet way, gave her space. She explored halls no mortal had seen,
learned names of the dead,
touched the roots of sorrow, and somewhere in that stillness, she stopped being just the maiden. She began to become Persephone. Before she left, because yes, she would leave, he offered her a final gift. A pomegranate. She took it, held it, ate 6 seeds. Just 6, but that was enough. 'Cause the underworld had laws, and to taste its food was to bind a part of yourself to it. She didn't flinch, because some doors shouldn't stay all the way closed.
Let's rise now, but not all the way. Because this is a story of halves.
Of spring and shadow, of reunions that don't last forever, and of a girl who no longer belongs fully to any one world. Let the rain fall in rhythms, half warm, half cold, because Persephone is coming home, but not to stay.
You can leave the underworld.
But it never quite leaves you. Above ground, Demeter grieved.
Not with tears, but with frost, with empty fields.
With silence where crops should bloom. She walked the earth barefoot, calling for her daughter, and the world withered around her.
Even the gods began to worry.
No offerings, no harvest, no life, so Zeus, ruler of Olympus, sent for Hades. Let her go, he said. And Hades, with surprising softness, replied, She is not a prisoner. She is a guest. Ask her what she wants. And so she rose, back through shadow, through stone, through the cracked open meadow where she once knelt as a girl. Demeter met her in a storm of joy and sorrow.
Held her, scolded her, cried. But when she looked into Persephone's eyes, something had changed.
The innocence was still there, but now it sat beside something deeper.
Something sovereign. The truth came out.
The seeds, the law, the choice that wasn't quite a choice. Demeter raged. But Persephone did not weep. She stood tall and said, I ate them.
I will not pretend I didn't. I will return.
So a deal was made, 6 months above, 6 months below, half a year in sunlight,
half a year in shadow.
And from that day forward, the world itself began to breathe in seasons. In the spring she is core again, maiden, daughter, bringer of blossoms. And when the leaves begin to fall and the air cools, she descends. Not as a girl, not as a victim, but as Persephone, queen of the dead, a crown in her hair,
a realm beneath her feet, and a heart that knows how to balance darkness with bloom.
They called it a tragedy, a tale of theft.
But maybe it was a story of becoming, of a girl who learned that she could belong to 2 places.
To 2 selves and rule them both. Let's bring it all to a close now, not with a roar, but with a whisper. You've walked through myth and memory, through gods and grief, through rain and gold and silence, and every story was a reflection, not just of the past, but of you. In every story, there's a little truth. In every truth, a little story waiting to be told again. You've heard of Hercules, the boy who carried guilt like armor and learned to turn pain into purpose.
Of Icarus, who flew not to defy, but simply to feel free.
Of Baucis and Philemon, who loved so gently that even the gods paused to watch. You've walked with Atalanta, who ran faster than every expectation, until she chose to slow down for someone who never asked her to. You've knelt by the hearth with Hestia, burning quietly, holding the center of the world together. You've held Pandora's jar and realized that even after every shadow escapes, hope remains. You stood beside Helen, not as a trophy, but as a woman still trying to be seen. You braved the labyrinth with Theseus, where monsters wear more than horns, and love doesn't always last the length of the return. And finally, you followed Persephone, who learned that becoming whole sometimes means becoming half light, half dark, and wholly herself. The rain still falls. Maybe you're lying in bed, eyes open in the dark. Maybe you're drifting. Maybe you're wondering what comes next. But listen, every myth you've heard tonight isn't just ancient history. There are stories of choice, of being seen, of learning to carry what the world gives you, and still shape it into something meaningful. You're not a hero in shining armor. You don't need to be.
You're the one holding the thread. You're the one choosing the next step.
And even if the maze ahead looks long, you're not alone in it anymore. Close your eyes if they're not already. Breathe softly.
And know that the stories will wait for you. Always, because rain falls, gods whisper, and the myths,
They're never done speaking. Good night, friend. And thank you for walking with them.